I left work earlier than I expected. The evening went awry from the very beginning. The equipment at the factory broke down, and the shift had to be finished earlier. It seems to be necessary to be happy. An extra couple of hours at home would not hurt, but something told me that this evening would end differently than I imagined. On the way, the sky was overcast, and the first drops of rain, as if harbingers of something bad, hit the windshield. By the time I drove up to the house, the rain had become so heavy that the wipers could barely cope. Turning off the engine, I sat in the car for a couple of seconds, listening to the downpour, which pounded on the roof like a drum roll. A strange feeling crept into my head, as if everything around me hinted, "Don't open this door. Come back." But I went out, and immediately the icy rain penetrated through my leather jacket. I shrugged my shoulders from the cold and hurried to the porch. I was greeted on the steps by hastily thrown children's toys, cars, and a teddy bear. Gina usually didn't leave such things outside. She was pedantic to the point of insanity. I frowned and looked at the windows. Not a single light was on in the house. Her parents should have had children, I knew that. But Gina always met me at home, cooking dinner or reading a book in an armchair under a floor lamp in the living room. And now everything seemed to be unnaturally calm. This silence chilled me to the bone. I put the key in the lock, and the door opened without the usual clang, as if it had not been latched for a long time. As I took a step inside, I heard the wet sole of my shoes slip on the laminate. I quickly dropped my shoes on the doormat and looked around. No sounds, no familiar smells. There was no sound of the radio, no clatter of knives in the kitchen, no children's toys underfoot. Only the sound of the rain, muffled by the walls. Something inside me jumped. I walked mechanically deeper into the house and looked into the nursery. The room was empty. The toys were neatly stacked on the shelves. The beds were made. Nothing unusual, but for some reason this order was frightening. My chest ached. What if something happened to the children? But then I remembered. They're staying with Gina's parents tonight. Everything is logical. But why then did the anxiety still not recede? I moved down the hall to our bedroom. The door is ajar, and a faint light comes through from inside, as if from a lamp on the bedside table. My breathing quickened, and my heart was pounding as if it was about to jump out of my chest. Why is the light on if Gina never goes to bed before me? I stopped in front of the door, waited a couple of seconds, and then pushed it open decisively. And what I saw cut into my consciousness like an electric shock. My wife was lying on the bed, in the very center. Damp strands of hair trembled on her body, as if she had just survived a storm, but not the one on the street. A huge man with tattoos on his arms and back loomed over her, blocking almost the entire view. Their movements were synchronized, as if in some kind of vicious dance, from which one could not look away. They didn't notice me. I froze in place, as if time had stopped. Everything was mixed up in my head, pain, anger, humiliation. But at the same time, I couldn't move, as if I was chained to the floor. My chest was squeezed so hard that it became difficult to breathe. My fingers automatically reached for the light switch on the wall. I clicked, and a bright light flashed in the room. Gina looked up sharply, her eyes wide with surprise, but not with fear or guilt. There was no hint of shame. There was an expression on her face that I'd never seen in all the years we'd been together. Annoyance mixed with defiance. "Damn it, Danny!" she screamed, as if I had done something terrible. "Why did you come back so early?" Her words hit me like an icy shower. She did not apologize, did not try to justify herself. She only irritably reproached me for not coming home on schedule. I felt something break inside me. My hands clenched into fists, and I took a step toward them. The man finally noticed me, but he didn't look surprised or scared. He turned to me, his lips stretched in a lazy grin full of self-confidence. "Hi, Danny," he drawled. "How are you?" It was Kyle. I knew him, not personally, but there were enough rumors about him. He was known as someone who was better not to mess with. Tall, broad-shouldered, covered in tattoos, he radiated danger, like a predator who knows that his prey will not leave. I rushed at him without thinking about the consequences. But Kyle easily caught my punch and threw me against the wall with such force that I almost lost consciousness. A sharp pain flared in my chest as his fist slammed into my ribs. I fell to the floor, gasping for air like a stranded fish. "You shouldn't have come here," he said, leaning over me. His voice sounded almost regretful, but his eyes shone with triumph. He dressed so calmly, as if what had happened was an ordinary thing. I was still lying on the floor when he walked past me and headed for the door. At parting, he gave me a look full of contempt. "You're not a bad guy, Danny," he said mockingly, "but you don't belong here." He disappeared, leaving me alone, helpless and humiliated. Gina got out of bed without even trying to cover herself. There was still no trace of remorse on her face. She came up to me, looked down at me, and said coldly, "Now you know, and I'm not going to apologize." I tried to get up, but the pain in my side held me down. Gina leaned toward me like a victor hovering over a defeated enemy. "Kyle is better than you at everything," she said with icy certainty. "But I'm not going to leave. I still need you. Someone has to take care of the children." I couldn't say or do anything. I was lying on the cold floor, feeling the world around me crumble, and with it my life. Outside, the rain was hitting the roof harder and harder. Thunder was rumbling somewhere in the distance, and this storm seemed to be a reflection of the chaos that was happening inside me. So I was left lying in the dark, alone with my pain and betrayal, in a house that was no longer mine. I woke up to a dull pain in my side. Every movement was a flash in my ribs, reminding me of yesterday's fight with Kyle. It was still raining outside, as if the sky shared my condition. Gina behaved as if nothing had happened. In the morning, she left the bedroom, gathered the children to her grandmother, and did not even bother to talk to me. It was as if I was just furniture, a part of the interior that was no longer being paid attention to. I went to work not so much out of necessity as to escape from this house. Even in the car, it seemed to me that the pain in my ribs was less than the one that settled inside me. But as soon as I entered the workshop and felt the heavy smell of machine oil and heard the hum of machines, it became easier. I knew that work would distract me, at least for a while. I was noticed right away. Colleagues exchanged glances. Some stopped in the middle of a conversation when I passed by. During the break, everything became obvious. I couldn't hide my condition, and someone had to ask. There were 4 of us at the dinner table. Me, Glenn, the chief mechanic, an old friend of mine, and a couple of other workers, Barry and Freddie. They all noticed my appearance, the swollen face, the slow movements, as if every muscle refused to work. But they were silent until Glenn broke the silence. "Danny, you look like you've been run over by a truck," he said, looking at me curiously. "What happened?" At first, I wanted to keep everything to myself, but anger was still throbbing in his chest. And when I started talking, the words came out on their own. "Gina," I began looking into my coffee cup. "She is sleeping with someone else." Glenn and the others froze, as if I had confessed to a crime. Barry even put down his fork with a piece of potato. His usually frivolous face turned serious. "Are you kidding?" he said with disbelief. "No, I caught them last night. Kyle, a huge bastard, and—" I stopped, feeling a lump in my throat. "He beat me up." There was a long, uncomfortable pause. Everyone was looking at me, not knowing what to say. But then Glenn spoke up. "You can't leave it like that, Danny. Something has to be done." "But what?" I asked bitterly. "I'm not even sure I can fight him. He's stronger than me." Barry and Freddie exchanged glances. I noticed something strange in their looks, not sympathy, but some kind of gambling determination. "We'll help," Freddie said, tapping his fingers on the table. "This cannot be forgiven. This guy has to pay. What if humiliate him so that he remembers it?" Barry offered with a sly smile. "Yes," Freddie said, his eyes twinkling. "We will make him feel ashamed at every mention of your name." Glenn leaned closer, looking at me seriously. "But revenge has to be smart, Danny. Don't fight. Revenge should be such that he feels as insignificant as he made you feel." The idea began to take shape in my head while they were talking. The thought that I was not alone in this filled me with malicious determination. "And how to do it?" I asked quietly. Freddie broke into a smile. "I have a few thoughts. Let's start small. Visit him at work when he least expects it. And then," he stopped, giving me the opportunity to come up with a plan for myself. Barry laughed and slapped me on the shoulder. The main thing is to show him that we are not just patient. We'll give him a show he won't forget. Glenn nodded. We're with you, Danny. We won't let him win. Glenn, Freddie, and Barry gathered closer, like conspirators, and began to outline a plan. At first, it sounded like a bunch of silly ideas, more like the antics of teenagers. But the longer they discussed it, the clearer it became that they were serious. Revenge was supposed to be both humiliating and subtle, without direct violence, but with a blow to Kyle's ego. So that's it, Glenn began, drumming his fingers on the table. The first thing to do is to show Kyle that he is no longer safe, that his confidence can turn against him. And that will be the beginning. I asked, still doubtful, but feeling the curiosity and anger building inside me. Freddie grinned and pulled a small plastic bag out of his pocket. Inside were capsules with some kind of white powder. Sleeping pills, he explained. Very powerful. We'll mix it in his coffee when he's at work or at the bar. He'll fall asleep like a baby, but he'll wake up in a very unusual situation. Barry chuckled, as if he had already imagined this scene in his head. Let's do this. Mix it up for him while he doesn't suspect anything. And when he passes out, we'll come up with something interesting. For example, I asked, feeling my curiosity turn to excitement. Barry leaned over to me and said softly, almost in a whisper, imagine, he wakes up in his car, completely naked. The car is parked at the police station, and the keys are on the seat next to it. He's going to have to go outside and explain it somehow. Freddie grinned, enjoying the picture. Or we can wake him up somewhere in the city center. Do you know what it will look like when he tries to figure out what's going on like that? I couldn't help but smile, feeling a little better for the first time in a long time. But Glenn shook his head, stroking his beard thoughtfully. It's funny, of course, but it's too obvious. We need something thinner, something that will corrode him from the inside out, something that will make him constantly turn around and wait for a stab in the back, Barry added. Freddie suddenly leaned forward, his eyes flashing with excitement. What if we make him think you're always watching him? We'll call a couple of times from an unknown number. We won't say a word. We will send strange packages. For example, his photos taken from afar, with the caption, I see you. Or the next time he's with Gina, we'll send her a message on your behalf, Barry suggested. Let him understand that you always know when he is with her. These ideas were spinning in my head like a whirlwind, and I felt that I was starting to enjoy this idea. Revenge could become not just retribution, but a game, one in which Kyle would not suspect where and when the next blow would follow. Glenn finally spoke again. This time his voice became serious. All this is good, but we need a final chord. Something to make Kyle realize that he hadn't just crossed the line. He'd ruined his whole life. He paused, and then added, we must make sure that he loses what is most important to him, his reputation. And how will we do it? I asked, looking at my friends with interest. Freddie smiled, as if he had already come up with something brilliant. It's very simple. I have a friend who works at the local newspaper. We're going to create a fake story about Kyle getting caught in some dirty business, and we'll put it on a news site. Let all his friends see him. Even if it's a lie, reputation is a fragile thing. It collapses instantly. And if he starts having problems at work, Barry added, already imagining the development of events. No one will want to support him when the rumors start spreading. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a purpose again. Anger no longer seemed aimless and destructive. Now he was focused on something specific, something that could bring me satisfaction. Glenn put his hand on my shoulder and looked seriously into my eyes. We'll be with you, Danny. We're not going to let this bastard get away with it. I nodded, feeling my resolve boil up inside me. The plan began to take shape, and I knew one thing. This evening would be the first step towards retribution. I was driving, watching the building. Ahead, behind a glass display case, a familiar figure could be seen. Kyle was sitting at his desk, holding a cup of coffee in his hands. He looked as confident as the night I found him at home, a smug expression on his face, as if the world belonged to him. The baseball bat was lying on the front passenger seat, heavy, cold like a part of me. I ran my fingers over it, feeling the tension building inside me. The plan seemed so simple in my head. To go in, catch him alone, and return to him all the humiliation that he had caused me. But now, as I sat here, my hand on the doorknob froze. If you don't go now, he'll think you're broken, the thought flashed. I opened the door and got out of the car. The bat remained under the jacket. The rain was drizzling slightly, and I could feel the cold drops trickling down my neck, but it only made me more determined. Once inside the building, I headed for Kyle's office. With each step, the tension grew, and my heart was pounding in my chest so hard that I thought it would pierce my chest. I went to the door, opened it abruptly, and went in. Kyle didn't flinch. He looked up at me, calmly put down his cup, and leaned on the back of his chair. "Hi, Danny," he said, as if he was glad to see me. "I was wondering when you'd show up." I froze for a second. His calmness unsettled me. He was obviously expecting me. I took a step forward and tightened my grip on the bat under my jacket, but he didn't even move. "Did you come to beat me?" Kyle asked, tilting his head to the side. There was no fear or aggression in his voice, just cold curiosity. "Do you think it will make a difference?" I stared at him in silence, trying to contain my rage. But he was cunning. He felt like he was in control of the situation. "Danny, let's not have a circus," he continued, leaning back in his chair. "I understand how bad you feel right now, but you know beating me up won't change anything." "Yes?" I said through my teeth. "And what will change?" Kyle got up and walked around the table, standing right in front of me. He was a head taller than me, and he exuded dangerous confidence. "Listen, Danny," he said softly, as if he were addressing a friend. "You're a good father. You take care of your children. And to be honest, I don't give a damn about it. All I need is Gina. But you'll get yours too if you want to." "What are you talking about?" I could hardly keep myself from hitting him. Kyle grinned at my confusion. "It's simple. I'm not going to destroy your family. You can stay with the children, continue to play the role of an exemplary husband. And I'll come a couple of times a week when it's needed." His words sounded like a slap in the face. He talked about it as calmly as if he were offering a business deal. "Are you serious?" I could barely breathe with anger. "Absolutely," he replied calmly. "You know you have no choice. You can't do anything, Danny. If you try, things will only get worse." I felt like everything was boiling inside. There really weren't many options. I could have hit him here and now. But what's next? The police, the scandal, the children. Everything could collapse in an instant. "Do you think I'm just going to agree to this?" I asked, trying not to lose my temper. Kyle chuckled. "Yes, Danny, because it's the best option for everyone. You save your life, your children, and no one will know what's really going on." He took a step back, giving me time to think about his offer. My head was buzzing, and I felt cornered. "You can't stop me," he added coldly. "Even if you try." I stood in front of him, clutching the bat under my jacket. All my plans for revenge fell apart like a house of cards. Kyle had calculated everything. He knew what to put pressure on me and how to turn my life into a cage from which there was no escape. "Think about it, Danny," he said finally, returning to his desk. "You can still keep what's left." I stood there feeling destroyed. The bat in his hand seemed like a useless weight now. I wanted to hit him, destroy him, but I knew it wouldn't change anything. "You decide for yourself," he added, sitting down in an armchair and looking at me mockingly. "But you know there's no other way." I turned around and left the office without saying another word. Outside, the rain continued to drizzle, as if emphasizing the hopelessness of what was happening. I walked slowly to the car, got behind the wheel, and looked at the empty road in front of me. My thoughts were confused, my heart was pounding, and a feeling of powerlessness came in waves. I knew I'd made a choice, even though I hadn't even said it out loud. Kyle won, or at least that's what he thought. The rain had not stopped for the second day. Its monotonous noise drowned out thoughts, but did not get rid of the oppressive feeling that settled inside. I was sitting in the kitchen, looking at the phone, which was lying on the table like a time bomb. It seemed to me that every call or message would only bring closer the moment when I would finally drown in this nightmare. In the evening, Gina sat on the couch, flipping through a magazine, as if nothing had happened. Her complete indifference was stronger than her words. It seemed that this life, where she was a wife in one role and a lover in the other, suited her perfectly. I was shaking with impotence and rage, but I didn't show it. Everything had to go according to plan, my plan. An hour later, there was a knock on the door. I looked at my watch. It was exactly 9 o'clock in the evening. Kyle always came at the same time. Gina got up from the couch, not even bothering to look at me, and headed for the front door. I heard it open, and his heavy footsteps echoed down the hall. He walked into the house as if he were at home, nodding at me with a lazy grin. I stared at him in silence, clenching my fists under the table so hard that my nails dug into my palms. Kyle walked into the bedroom without even turning around. Gina followed him as if it was just an ordinary evening. I got up and went to the window. The rain was still hitting the glass, drowning out the sounds inside the house. I took a deep breath. Everything was going as planned. For the last time, 20 minutes later, I got up and opened the closet by the front door. From there, I took out the very object I was holding for this moment, a baseball bat. This time it will be different. I walked slowly down the corridor. There was only one rhythm pounding in my head, like blow after blow, each movement getting closer to the finale. I stopped at the bedroom door, leaving some space so they wouldn't notice me right away. I listened. There were muffled conversations and giggles inside. I quietly pushed the door open and went in. They were both on the bed, Gina lying next to him laughing. When Kyle saw me, he sat up a little and grinned impudently. "Will you join us, Danny?" But this time I didn't hesitate. The bat in my hand shot up into the air and landed with a thud on his shoulder. Kyle screamed in surprise and pain, but I didn't stop. The second blow hit him in the ribs, and he fell off the bed to the floor. "Are you crazy?" Gina screamed, jumping up and retreating to the wall. Kyle tried to get up, but I hit him again, this time on the leg. He howled in pain, and something new flashed in his eyes, fear. There was no longer the confidence that he had shown before. "Did you think that everything would remain without consequences?" I croaked, feeling the adrenaline pumping through my veins. He tried to crawl away, but I pinned him to the floor with the bat, hovering over him. "That's enough," Gina pleaded, but her voice didn't matter anymore. I stopped. Kyle lay in front of me, helpless, gasping in pain and realizing that his time of domination was over. I took a step back and threw the bat on the floor. Her thud echoed through the room. "Get out," I said, pointing at the door. Kyle got up slowly, writhing in pain, and without saying a word, hobbled to the exit. I watched him walk away without turning around. He knew that if he returned, everything would end much worse. When the door slammed behind him, there was silence in the room. Gina was standing against the wall, pale, her eyes wide with fear. "What have you done?" she whispered. I looked at her, the woman I once loved, but now I saw only emptiness and indifference in her eyes. "I did what I had to do," I replied, feeling strangely relieved. I turned around and headed for the exit. Gina didn't try to stop me, and that was the best she could do. I went outside, where the rain continued to pour down, as if trying to wash away everything that had happened. I took a deep breath of the humid air and felt the tension leave me. This house, this life, no longer had any power over me. The unknown was ahead of me, but it didn't scare me anymore. I was no longer a prisoner of the situation. Everything was in my hands now, and that's where today's story ends. If you liked it, don't forget to like it and leave a comment. Your feedback helps the algorithms promote my videos. If this is your first time here, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It helps me keep creating new stories for you. Thank you for watching to the end, and see you in the next video.